I heard that. Okay, so that's Robert on my what would be my left.
I'm Robert.
Yes. Okay. I don't know if I never know Zoom if it's backwards or forwards or whatever, but I know that you're on my left. So and
that seems to work. I'm on Robbie's left.
Okay.
And we're actually doing this. I've never done this where two people are in the same room. Brett and I just had breakfast in Los Angeles, and I live in London, and Brett lives in Toronto, and we're here in Los Angeles, lunch with the company. And so very exciting to actually, and I've known Brett for 15 years and or more. And this is, and I haven't seen him though in about almost 2 years,
almost 2 years.
But we started this whole company on Zoom with our other business partner, Andrew Kaplan.
You know, back in the old days, everybody had to have a handshake in a meeting, et cetera. Nowadays, it's a Zoom meeting, right? Yeah. Virtual. Well, you know, we live, you know, in very interesting times indeed. First off, this is more than 2 years in the making, then, is what you're saying in terms of this company.
I would say that this is for me personally, it's a lifetime in the making. I've wanted to do something with, you know, to sort of bring my family's intellectual property to the forefront, to have a business side. Ever since Walt Disney passed away, there was, you know, film musicals kind of went the way of the dinosaur within 10 years, and then stage musicals were really where my dad should have gone, but he was known for his film musicals. And so what Sherman Theatrical is able to do is be a vehicle to both from a creative point of view, but also from a business point of view, which is why it's great to have somebody like Brett and like Andrew as team members.
Now, Andrew is doing what with the company?
Andrew, do you want to explain?
So Andrew and I are co-CEOs. Okay. We're responsible. We were primarily the two responsible for raising our initial capital to start that we used to start the company. Andrew has a kind of a corporate strategist background.
Okay.
So he sits on a few boards of actually a couple of entertainment companies, mining companies. He has a family business in investor relations. So as Andrew and I basically put the structure in place, and we're going to be responsible for strategic acquisitions, making sure that the business side is running. You know, obviously the three of us at the beginning are all working very closely together. But as we start moving forward, you know, our kind of niches are going to start to play out. So Andrew's going to be responsible for our next funding raise and making sure that the infrastructure is in place to do that. I'm helping a lot with the day-to-day, and you know, Robbie is really spending a lot of time on the creative and sifting through all of the intellectual property that we have. And then, you know, we as a team decide how we want to go and deploy our capital to best monetize that for now. You know,
how did you and Robbie meet?
Through Andrew.
Actually,
okay.
So
it's an interesting story.
So one of the projects that's very near and dear to all of us, to Andrew, to myself, and to Brett, is a project that my father and uncle started in the early 1950s. It was the first time they ever worked together on a children's project and it was a character that my dad created called Incus the Rhamphorhynchus. And a Rhamphorhynchus is like a small pterodactyl. And it marked the first time anybody had ever, if it had been made in the 1950s, it marked the first time that anybody would have ever done a dinosaur musical. As it turned out, they did do dinosaur musicals. Other people did dinosaur musicals, but this project, they made a children's record, but then nothing ever happened with it. I was starting a production company in the early 2000s, and before I had met Andrew, and then I met Andrew, who was in investment relations, and he gathered together some investors, people that he'd worked with, and one of his investor friends was actually a good friend of his, and his name was Bret Goldin, sitting to my left, and right. So Bret was actually an initial investor in Incus. Then, unfortunately, the credit crunch happened, and and that temporarily forestalled our efforts for Incus. But so one of the projects that we're doing, although most of what we're doing is theater related, and some music licensing, this is one project that we have, and our feeling is that there's such a marketplace for it now that why not do it? And it's a wonderful piece because it has some really genuinely touching and beautiful songs and fun songs by the Sherman brothers. I co-wrote the screenplay with my dad. We did a whole animatic storyboard reel, so you can literally watch an 81-minute storyboard reel. We had tremendous animators on. We had Disney animators, 2 Oscar nominees in our team, storyboard team. So it wasn't like the full animation.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's an amazing little piece, and it's basically ready to. I mean, it's ready to go.
Just never really fell into the right hands, just because timing and no one was really focusing on it. And now it's definitely something that we're
so this is going to be released as a film rather than a theater piece.
Correct. So there's
there could be children's theater, like they're doing Winnie the Pooh.
Eventually it might become a piece of theater.
And to Robbie's point, this is like Winnie the Pooh with dinosaurs, right? It's classic Sherman Brothers music,
yeah.
Lovable characters, great story. That from a business side of things, after the first film is made, there's a lot of direction that we plan on taking it, and there are treatments already for
sequels and prequels.
Yeah.
So I mean, we even have a novelization version of the book ready to go. Like a children's Harry Potter style, a little more juvenile, a little more for kids, but not juvenile in the bad way. And it's a lovely little story, and it's all about it's got a very heart. I did that deliberately because I've gained 10 pounds on this trip, so I'm sort of cutting off some of my weight by slipping out of the picture.
The TV adds a little bit of weight to you.
That's what I always tell.
I know that. I grew up obviously with the Sherman Brothers, and I'm probably going to date myself as far as that goes, but I actually saw the original screening of Mary Poppins in 1965, I think it was, right?
64, yeah.
So 64, 65, yeah, whenever it was. I remember, growing up with the Sherman Brothers, the Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and all of the different fantastic shows that I saw in the movie theaters. And of course, many of them, when I had my own son, I would buy those Walt Disney films and on videotape. At that time it was VHS. I may have bought all of those all over again on DVD as far as that goes, because I just enjoyed, the collection, et cetera. So, they go back in history in terms of not just film, but also music. And in terms of my bringing up as far as my background, they're part of my history. I believe that they're part of my son's history. And now my granddaughter, obviously, is getting put into that same mix. And they've got such a wonderful legacy. So, I love the fact that, there's a Jewish component to this too. There's so many people who are involved who are Jewish, with the Walt Disney Company, et cetera, So, the fact of the matter is that there is that aspect too of I just did a presentation of Jews on Broadway, and people were amazed at the length and depth of how far back, sure, Jewish theater, Yiddish theater, et cetera, evolved into what we now know as Broadway, and how far back it goes. And the same thing can be said for the Sherman Brothers. I mean, they really staked out their territory. And again, I know that, and I'm not bringing this in for bad reasons or whatever, but I know that Walt Disney gets a bad rap sometimes from some people.
I want to say something for the record on this, because and I think it's important to know, my dad was a World War II veteran. He was one of the first, literally the first of 8 men at the liberation of Dachau.
I remember.
My father did not suffer anti-Semites. He didn't suffer them. And he'd get into a fist fight with an anti-Semite, and did on occasion. He was a tough guy. And if Walt Disney ever uttered, in fact, one time Walt Disney actually defended my dad against some anti-Semites working at Disney Studios. And that's its own story. If you get a chance, read my dad's book, Moose: Chapters from My Life. It's available on Amazon and everything. Yeah. And if you like the sound of my voice,
and you can listen to it.
Yeah, if you like the sound of my voice, you can hear 11 hours of me talking.
Well, that sounds like a good cross-country trip idea.
Yeah.
Robbie,
It's a long 11 hours, and that's just the first 45 minutes.
but the fact of the matter is that I find it almost unfathomable that somebody who could bring so much joy to children could have been somebody who would have harbored ill feelings towards any particular race or group.
Well, my dad made it a very, very, because all this stuff came out supposedly about him, but you have to understand where it started from. In 1967, I think it was, and don't quote me on this, there was a book called The Dark Prince or something, and it was all about Walt Disney and how he had, and the theories were just ridiculous. It was the year after Walt Disney died, and how libel laws work. You can't libel a dead person, so there was no lawsuit there, even though the family might not have liked it, and you lose all your rights in that sense. And basically what happened is that this guy made some money saying that he was misogynist to women, but I mean, I would argue that he wasn't. If you read the letters in the context of the times. Now, is it possible that Walt Disney in 1940, and I don't know this to be true, that in 1940, before they knew about the atrocities of Auschwitz and et cetera, that he may, amongst his Christian friends, might have made a comment about cheap Jews? You know something? Haven't we all been in a room where somebody made an off-color joke about an ethnicity amongst the Kiddush club of our shul?
Yeah.
Are we gonna condemn somebody?
And again, you got to remember too that Walt Disney was starting out back in the 1920s, starting up his own studio up against some pretty heavy hitters who were mostly Jewish. And so there was a lot of competition going on.
But it wasn't, though, because remember, Walt was doing something very different. And this is, and I'll tell you something, I appreciate this more, and I feel it's almost a personal thing, because what my dad and uncle were, you probably have noticed that in the Broadway stuff, when they talk about the great Broadway Jewish songwriters, they never mention my dad. Well, it's because he didn't do that much on Broadway. He did a couple things, but not much. But in essence, he was an orphan in the business, in the sense that nobody was doing film musicals in the 1960s except Walt Disney. They were doing Broadway shows that became music, but not original musicals for film. So the Hollywood musical songwriter didn't exist in, my dad was the only one. We had to do a whole bunch of estate modeling after my father passed away for tax reasons. And, it was a really challenging thing because there was nobody we could point to. You can't point to Stephen Sondheim. It's same generation, although Stephen Sondheim's still alive.
Right.
But you can't point to their estate and say it's similar to the Shermans. Compton and Green, this is a decade earlier, and it was a different model. There was different copyright laws. You can't point to anybody. So it was a very unusual situation and a tricky thing to navigate, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. We did, thank God, but it was tricky and much trickier than people realize. And Walt Disney was, remember, it wasn't that he wasn't Jewish and he wasn't allowed into Jewish country clubs. First of all, there weren't Jewish country clubs that worked in reverse. It was, they created the Jewish country clubs because Walt was his own creature. He was doing his own thing, and he was about the future. This was not Henry Ford. No,
I understand that. That. But like I said, he gets a bad rap, and I honestly don't think that
it's an undeserved bad rap.
And the other thing I should mention is that you touched on it. Nobody else was doing what the Sherman Brothers were doing. I mean, there were people on Broadway. There was Gershwin and his people, and then later on, you had Rodgers and Hammerstein, and they were doing their, right. And again, Adler and Ross for a short time there. Again, all of them were doing fantastic work on Broadway, establishing themselves. Nobody was really doing the same thing or the same kind of thing in Hollywood that the Sherman Brothers were doing. They really established their own domain, as it were. And very few people challenged them.
They reinvented the family musical. And I wanted to point something out for your article. I think you'll find interesting. Feed the Birds from Mary Poppins is, although it's not a Jewish song, I mean, it takes place at a cathedral, at the doorsteps of a cathedral, although St. Paul was Shaul in a previous incarnation, but that's stretching it a bit. But what is very Jewish is the sentiment of the song. And that is the idea that there is a merit to giving charity, right? And that merit goes to the giver.
It's
and
the
that
same thing about leaving the corners of the fields unharvested for the
that's right
poor.
from the Book of
Yeah,
Ruth. Yeah.
right.
So yeah, the idea of tzedakah is not it is that it's a way to it's a privilege to give tzedakah, and it's actually the privilege of being alive is the opportunity. And so this is your opportunity to join the living, and that's what that song is about. And there was never a song previously in pop. You can trust me on this, or you can do the research yourself for a couple of years. There never was, prior to Feed the Birds, a popular song that was about the merits of giving charity. There are a lot of songs about love and blue skies and other, topical things. But and then another very Jewish concept. My dad's most well-known song and the most translated and the most performed song on earth is "It's a Small World After All."
Yeah.
And what people
I keep
don't
hearing it. I've been in.
yeah, sorry about that.
We all do.
Yeah, if I could have a royalty for your imagination,
Yeah.
So there's that song was, it's interesting when it was born. It was born right. It was written right after, literally like weeks after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and my dad taught me a lesson about songwriting. He said, there's a lyric in the song that isn't spoken. See, the song goes, "There's so much that we share that it's time we're aware it's a small world after all. So let's not blow it up."
Yeah.
And he was serious. He was explaining it's what you don't say. But the point is, and you could actually call it, it's been mistakenly called a prayer for peace. My dad said it's not a prayer. A prayer goes to the Almighty. My dad was more of a secular kind of a Jew, but he believed in God, but he also had his moments of doubt, as we all do. And one of the things, but he also said, no, it's our job to take this gift of the world and not destroy it and do good things with it. And so what you have here is basically, before it was ever popularly called this, Tikkun Olam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what It's a Small World is. And it's the first time there was ever a world anthem about with this thing where there wasn't the praise of the Almighty God in it, what was the Beethoven one?
Ode to Joy.
Yeah, Ode to Joy. This kind of thing.
Number 9. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And which is the beautiful concept, but this is saying, no, this is in the nuclear age. So there's a very modernist kind of a message to the thing. And I think that underlying everything that was the appeal that these two young Jewish rock and roll songwriters had to Walt Disney, was the fact that he was a futurist. He was about tomorrow. And my dad was able to pick up on that and able to sort of give voice to it.
Just to go back a little bit, I think it's a Jewish duty to wrestle with God. I think that doubting the existence of the Almighty has always been something for Moshe Rabbeinu, who never really doubted the existence of God, but always wrestled with him. That's sort of and I don't know, Brett, if you agree in that.
Well, Jacob did.
Yeah. I mean,
it seems like he's still here, Brett. Sorry, Brett's still here. I didn't realize that he was still in the room. I'm so sorry.
But I don't know. Like I said,
no. This is how this is exactly what what the company's built on, right? I mean,
me talking a lot.
Right.
It's the stories. It's the amazing works that we have access to, that we're gonna, again, there's stuff there that that's been sitting dormant for so long that we're excited to for lack of a better way to bring it to the world.
And we are already on Broadway. We've seen Mary Poppins, and we've seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Right. Are we going to see any kind of iterations of those, or new productions using that as a source material?
We can't speak too specifically yet about certain things that are my dad and uncle's. The first project that's on the books for us is actually my show called Lovebirds, which is about parrots and penguins singing in a vaudeville show. And it's a lot of fun. It's very light, and it has a very life-affirming kind of a message. I wrote the songs. I wrote the book, and there are some odes to the Sherman brothers in it, and my grandfather, who was also a big songwriter in his day. Al Sherman wrote songs for Frank Sinatra, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Bing Crosby, you name it.
Yeah. So again, I know this is a new company. and you probably have a lot, to look forward to. But have you got a sort of a game plan in terms of what you're going to work on first, besides the project you mentioned? In terms of, are you going to try to tackle more of the musical possibilities theater, or are you going to tackle some of the film things? Which do you hit the ground running with what first?
So one of the things is the blessing and the curse of this company is we've got an amazing amount of intellectual property that we have access to. The families, Robbie's, I mean, there's so much stuff that Robbie's done that's kind of that has, like, Lovebirds and a few other shows, a songbook. My point is that there's, and then the curse is the fact that there is so much into, like, how do we make that decision, right, as to what to do first. So Incus is like I said, a top priority project for us right now. The Robbie Sherman songbook, which you should hear more about soon. Lovebirds. So Robbie did that show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival back in 2015. And at that time it was a 1 hour show. So that just kind of gets expanded to a more, West End Broadway type 1 hour, 40 minutes. And so we're working on that. And then there's a number of Sherman Brothers songs that you might not have ever heard of, or there's songs from the 50s and 60s that we're actually in the process of sifting through to determine what we have rights to, what we don't have rights to, or what we can license. We're going to be licensing some of those songs to whether it be for sync or just for different projects. So those are kind of like what four projects that we're kind of focused on right now.
I mean, one of the things we'd love to do is sort of dinner theater kind of entertainment, which we think could have a real marketability as well, because these are fun songs, and again, I produced a show that I also wrote called A Spoonful of Sherman. And it basically covers 100 years. I mean, this is an amazing thing. 100 years of my family's songwriting, mostly my dad and uncle stuff, but a lot of my grandfather's stuff, which is actually my favorite part of the show, just because it's just such colorful stuff. And then a few songs by me as well, and tells the story of our family, but really kind of tells the story of America, because it's very much about the journey that my family took, was like so many families,
probably not unlike mine, although mine were not musical or as musical as your family.
What year did your family? Because my family came up through the South as well.
Right. I would say probably around the early 1900s, something like that.
Okay.
Late 1890s or early 1900s. My great-great-grandmother was in New Orleans, and my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother came to visit his mother-in-law and her mom. And so that's how they ended up here. And he was the kosher barber. Believe it or not, there are such things, or were such things back then. He retired in the 20s. In the 1920s, he lived to be, I think, 93, 94. He didn't die till 1959. So, the longevity, like in your family, we have been blessed with in mine. And although my father passed away at an earlier age than I would have liked, the fact of the matter is my mom right now is 89 and still kicking,
That's wonderful.
And again, one of my favorite songs from Mary Poppins that doesn't get a lot of I guess fame, because it's not supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and some of the other ones that have taken up, but is I Love to Laugh. I loved Ed Wynn. And that was probably one of my first exposures to him. Of course, another great Jewish performer. But it was fantastic. And I think that was the song as a little kid that I loved the most of all of them. And when you say Feed the Birds, now I like Feed the Birds. But when that song came on, when I was in the theater, it was like, would that old lady please stop singing, please? Because I want to get back to the fun parts. And I guess, one of the things about the Sherman Brothers, and I would assume in your approach to music too, is that it does have an element of fun. And I think that's what characterizes a lot of the music. And when I go to be entertained, it's nice to see something like a Hamilton where you're challenged and you see a lot of different things, and they use a different kind of convention to tell a story a different way. You know, your material, your dad and uncle's material, even your grandfather are throwbacks to a time when things were a little bit more simple, but also you know, more direct and more fun. So
It's the old school of songwriting.
yeah,
Where you see my grandfather, like George Gershwin and like Richard Rodgers and
sure.
Vincent Yeomans and all those classic Tin Pan Alley songwriters, they didn't get their job. They started off as song pluggers, where they would literally sit on Tin Pan Alley, 28th Street and Broadway, and they would pound out songs by other composers, and then they would, if they found something they liked, they might tweak it a little bit, and then they would bring it to the publisher, and then they'd get a piece of the action if they didn't sell the song. And in a nutshell, that was the old school. The new school of songwriting, the Jason Robert Brown school, if you will, is and by the way, Sondheim is old school. He's not new school. People think he's new school, and he's not. He's sort of a father of new school. Between Lehman Ingle, Stephen Sondheim, and Jason Robert Brown, kind of the new school. But they sort of inadvertently created this monster, in my opinion. It's a good monster. It's not a bad monster, but it isn't about commerciality. It's about, and they look at commerciality as being a bad word. See, I don't think we do. I think old school thinks of commerciality as being an indicator that you're touching a nerve of the public, that the public wants. And it doesn't mean you should be dictated by the public. You can still hone your message and you know, feed the birds, a message of charity. You spend 3 minutes, person has a different outlook on life, and it should be subliminal. It shouldn't be. That's the best kind of messaging. But new school is all about feelings, and it doesn't matter if there's structure to the song. It's very millennial in its approach. And you can tell I'm not the biggest fan of the new school, but
you know, I gotta say there's a place for commercial, even among the new people, because I don't think Jeffrey Sellers or Lin-Manuel Miranda turned down that $75 million payout
Right.
from Disney, right? So
No.
you know, there's a place for everybody who's trying to look a different way and making money.
And I think it's fair to say Lin-Manuel Miranda. I mean, it is an entertaining score. There are fun songs in that. I'm not a hip hop guy, but that doesn't mean that shouldn't negate it. I think that it's very valid, and it brings a new audience in. So even though that's not my thing.
So are you looking maybe down the road to partner in any way with Disney or some of these other people, DKG or any of the other film companies, or how are we looking
I mean,
in terms of that outlook?
We think that some of our projects, whether they're classic, like Incus again, I think is something that might be of interest to Disney from a distribution standpoint, right? Disney Plus, it can certainly live there. The project that Robbie referred to, A Spoonful of Sherman, is something that we're talking about for streaming, right? It's a great. I was lucky enough to see it live when we were living in London for a few years, and we went to go see it live in Greenwich Theater, and it was awesome. I mean, I had family coming to visit, and they flew over from the US that morning, so they were tired, and we dragged them to this show, and they loved it. You know, they stayed awake through the whole thing, and it was just lively and fun. And, you know, we think that project is going to be great for streaming. So yeah, there's definitely going to be opportunities for us to partnership. But, you know, one of the things that we're clear, like our mission is the Sherman family, Robbie Sherman stuff, Al Sherman stuff. But, you know, we're not going to look to do the Disney stuff, right? That's, you know, that's certainly in I don't want to say locked up, but that's not what we're focusing on.
Right. Okay. So again, you know, it's a new company, so you have a lot of opportunities and things that you know you can do, and then things that you might do later down the road. And I'm just trying to.
It's certainly an exciting time.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, I think that we pretty much covered. What exactly are you? I guess this is sort of like a junket. You're talking to a lot of different people right now for members of the press.
We have a lot of stuff going on. We have a lot of.
So I appreciate your
the
time,
trip here,
and I don't want. I mean, I've already taken up a half an hour. I think that's probably plenty of time for yours to go on to deal.
By the way,
with
who
other
do we
people.
bill? Who do we bill on this? Do we send it directly to you or to Crescent City Jewish News?
Send it to the American Jewish Press Association. I'm the president, and they'll deal with that.
And they'll
as well.
find the appropriate file for it, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I think that it's important that you expose this because, not only am I an editor locally, but I'm also one of those people that goes up to Broadway and they give me seats to go to theater and review those. So again, you're not talking to somebody who's just sort of like
No, I understand.
and also ran. But by the same token, you don't become a theater critic, oh, I think I'll become a theater critic tonight. It doesn't happen that way. And
No,
back
and
in the old days, my family used to have a record store down here. We used to sell to
Oh,
Stephen
wow.
Sondheim and John Kander. We didn't sell to the Sherman brothers, but we used to sell Mary Poppins. We used
Right.
Buena Vista. I remember it very well. We would sell all those records. So I come from a family that had musical background. And then my mother, my father, my uncle, who my mother and my uncle were in the record shop. My father was an optometrist, but they put together a group called S&S Productions, and they used to bring down all the big name acts to New Orleans, starting in 1963 with like Peter, Paul and Mary and Odetta, and then eventually the Supremes and Dionne Warwick and Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass and the Sly and the Family Stones and you name it, Simon and Garfunkel, Johnny Mathis 3 times, Johnny Rivers 3 times, Nancy Wilson, Dave Brubeck, Miles Davis. I mean, the numbers.
Who would
of
have thought New Orleans had a music scene?
Yeah, well, yeah, right, exactly.
You do.
The very first time Alan Toussaint performed on stage was for my parents' concert that they did with O.C. Smith, who you probably don't remember, but O.C. Smith had 2 big hits, 2 moderate hits, one called Little Green Apples and the other one called Son of Hickory Holler's Tramp. And they brought him to Municipal Auditorium, and Alan Toussaint, who was one of the great composer, arrangers, and writers out of New Orleans, was a personal friend of mine. I used to fix his computers too. Alan came out in all white, in white tails, with a white Steinway, and performed for the very first time in front of New Orleans because nobody knew who he was.
Wow.
And again, those sorts of things,
Amazing. I didn't realize he was from New Orleans.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. He was from. Matter of fact, he lived. As a kid, he only lived about 4 blocks that away as the crow flies in a section here in New Orleans. But anyway, I want to wish you, as I'd say on Broadway, break legs, much mazel and everything.
I get down to New Orleans every so often. One of my great friends from university is a guy named Tom Peruman. He's not Jewish, although he probably has some Ashkenazi Jews based on a deathbed confession from a grandmother of his who said, "I am an Ashkenazi," and then she died, apparently. So somebody in her family stabbed her.
If you'd like, I'll be happy to show you around and get you a Sazerac. Huh?
He lives down in, and I stayed at, what's the place with the merry-go-round? I'm blanking on the name.
Monteleone.
Yeah,
Carousel.
Yeah, I stayed in that hotel just in 2019, and right before the whole pandemic thing. It was great. I loved it, and I ate the best Mexican food. It wasn't a kosher restaurant, I have to admit, but it wasn't. I didn't eat any pork.
By the way, I know that the Sherman brothers didn't write the song "The Bear Necessities," which was sung by Louis Prima, actually offered to Louis Armstrong first, as you probably know the story, that he turned it down because of obvious connections to the monkey. But the point is that Louis Prima was from New Orleans, and his daughter Lena performs at the Monteleone on Friday nights. And she's getting.
It was my dad's idea. It was my dad's idea to get Louis Prima in because my dad loved the mom used to go to Vegas all the time. It was great. And what a genius. And also think about what an innovative thing that Jungle Book was, because that was the first time they had jazz in an animation, a children's animation. In those days, that was considered racy.
Right. I saw the screening. I loved it. I remember seeing the screening down at the theater that used to be the area where it was an old synagogue, believe it or not, the old Temple Sinai that they had over there. They basically raised the building, but what was left over, they had a building, and they showed a screening of the Jungle Book there. I remember, and as a kid, because we had a record shop, because we sold Buena Vista records, we got to go to the screening, So anyway, listen.
Next time I'm in New Orleans, or next time you're in London, we should definitely have a meal.
I will definitely try to get to London. That's one of my. I also have a connection to scouting, so I always like to get to to the old Gilwell Park that they have over there, which it has a big history in the Boy Scouts, where they had the wood badge course, etc. Yeah. In any event, thank you very much for your time. Best of luck for this whole thing, and I hope that it becomes a major concern, that everybody will be able to not only enjoy what creativity comes out of the company, but that it's a very good endeavor for you guys to be involved in. Bret,
Thank you.
I hope that Andrew and you make the money like you're supposed to. And do your
They're
part.
doing okay. They're doing all right.
All right. Thank you, Robbie.
Very
Appreciate it.
good team.
Lovely to meet you.
Stephanie, please send that when you can. I hope you enjoy
will
the
send it.
conversation, listening in as it were. Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alan.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. So good to meet you.